Every year, millions of acres are planted, harvested, and cleared. And the moment the planting stops, the food disappears with it. Fields return to bare soil. Supply depends on schedules, seeds, and seasons. That's how most crops work. Yet across roadsides, abandoned lots, and disturbed patches of land, there's a plant that follows a completely different timeline. Once it shows up, it doesn't need to be replanted next year, or even the year after that. Its seeds can sit quietly underground for decades, waiting for the right moment to return, sometimes long after the original plants are gone. It grows in heat. It survives drought. It produces edible leaves early on, and later, dense clusters of tiny grain. But why is this plant that can reappear for up to 50 years treated like something that needs to be destroyed? And more importantly, what happens when food grows back on its own? Well, this will surely fascinate you. You see, most plants survive by staying alive above ground. But this plant, pigweed, survives by disappearing. At the end of a growing season, a single pigweed plant can release tens of thousands of seeds into the soil. These seeds don't all sprout at once. Some germinate the following year, others wait. A portion enters dormancy, a natural pause that allows them to remain viable underground for long periods of time. In agricultural research, pigweed species like Amaranthus retroflexus and Palmer amaranth are known to form persistent soil seed banks. Under the right conditions, their seeds can remain capable of germination for decades. In some controlled burial studies, viable pigweed seeds have been recovered after 20 to 40 years in the soil. This means the plant's survival strategy isn't based on protecting a single generation. It's based on storing future generations below the surface. Construction, plowing, animal movement, even heavy rainfall can disturb the soil just enough to bring buried seeds back into the light, triggering germination years after the original plants disappeared. So once pigweed establishes itself in an area, removing what's visible above ground doesn't always end the cycle, because the next crop may already be waiting underground. Here's why. Pigweed doesn't offer just one usable stage. It changes roles as it grows. In the early weeks, when the plant is still under knee height, the leaves and tender growing tips are edible and commonly prepared the same way as spinach or other cooking greens. In many parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, cultivated amaranth, a close relative of wild pigweed, is grown specifically for these young leaves. They're harvested repeatedly through the vegetative stage, often before the plant begins producing flower spikes. As the season progresses, the same plant shifts its priority from leaf production to reproduction. The upper stem begins forming dense inflorescences, tight clusters of tiny flowers that eventually develop into seed heads. By late summer or early autumn, those seed heads contain hundreds to thousands of small, starch-rich grains. These grains are structurally similar to domesticated amaranth, which is used globally as a pseudocereal. Once mature, they can be collected, dried, and cooked in much the same way as rice or millet. 1 cup of cooked amaranth grain provides several grams of protein, along with iron, magnesium, and dietary fiber. So within a single growth cycle, the plant transitions from a leafy vegetable into a grain-producing food source, without requiring separate planting stages or multiple crop rotations. And both stages come from the same unmanaged patch of ground. We all know that most leafy greens slow down when the temperature rises. Pigweed speeds up. That difference comes down to how the plant handles sunlight. Pigweed belongs to a group of plants that use what's known as C4 photosynthesis, a more efficient pathway for converting sunlight into usable energy under hot, dry conditions. While most temperate crops rely on the older C3 pathway, C4 plants are able to minimize water loss during gas exchange and continue fixing carbon even when daytime temperatures climb above 30 degrees Celsius. In practical terms, this means pigweed maintains growth in environments where many food crops begin to struggle. Studies on species like Amaranthus palmeri show that C4 metabolism allows sustained photosynthetic activity during periods of intense sunlight and limited moisture. Instead of closing its leaf pores to conserve water, which slows growth in many plants, pigweed can keep them partially open while still managing internal water use efficiently. That's one reason it's frequently found in compacted soils, roadside verges, and dry agricultural margins where irrigation is limited or absent. Its physiology is tuned for heat tolerance, allowing rapid biomass production in conditions that would reduce the productivity of common vegetables. And once established, that metabolic edge helps it turn sunlight into edible matter, even when the rest of the field begins to fade. Well, in many regions where wild amaranth species grow naturally, they were never eaten straight from the field. They were prepared. Pigweed leaves, like those of spinach, chard, and beet greens, contain naturally occurring oxalates. These compounds can bind to minerals such as calcium and iron during digestion, which reduces how much the body absorbs from the food. When eaten raw in large amounts, oxalates may also contribute to irritation in sensitive individuals. Traditional cooking methods were developed around this long before the chemistry was understood. Boiling the leaves in water for a few minutes can significantly reduce soluble oxalate levels. In parts of West and East Africa, young amaranth leaves are routinely cooked into stews or lightly sautéed rather than consumed raw. Similar practices exist across South Asia and Central America. The seeds follow the same pattern. Amaranth grains contain phytic acid, a compound common in legumes and cereals that can bind to minerals such as zinc and magnesium. Soaking, fermenting, or thoroughly cooking the seeds helps reduce phytate levels and improves overall digestibility. These steps were standard in communities that relied on amaranth as a staple. Grinding the seeds into flour, popping them with dry heat, or simmering them into porridge were all part of making the grain usable as a regular food source. Preparation wasn't an optional step. It was part of the knowledge that made the plant work as a staple over time. That same preparation knowledge didn't just make amaranth usable for people. It also made it viable as a seasonal protein source beyond the human food system. In livestock nutrition research, several Amaranthus species have been evaluated as alternative forage and feed components, particularly for poultry and small ruminants. One reason is their amino acid profile. Amaranth leaves and seeds contain relatively higher levels of lysine compared to many cereal grains like maize or wheat, which are typically low in this essential amino acid. Lysine plays a key role in protein synthesis for animals. In poultry diets, inadequate lysine can affect growth rates and egg production. Trials using amaranth leaf meal as a partial replacement for conventional feed ingredients have shown it can contribute to meeting protein and amino acid requirements when properly processed. The plant's rapid biomass production also makes it suitable for forage under certain conditions. Young amaranth plants can be harvested and dried into leaf meal or used fresh as supplemental greens for animals like chickens, rabbits, or goats. However, just as with human use, preparation matters. Drying or wilting the plant before feeding can help reduce nitrate levels that may accumulate under high nitrogen conditions. In systems where feed costs are driven by imported soy or processed concentrates, locally available amaranth has been studied as a seasonal supplement that supports protein intake without relying entirely on commercial grain mixes. So the same plant that produces edible leaves and grain for humans has also been explored as a protein contributor further up the food chain. But if it can support nutrition across multiple levels of the food system, why is it treated as a threat once it shows up inside a field? Pigweed's strengths in the wild are exactly what make it difficult inside a field. Many Amaranthus species germinate quickly when soil temperatures rise in late spring. In row crops like maize, soybean, and cotton, that timing puts pigweed seedlings on the same schedule as newly planted crops. Once both are established, pigweed often grows faster in the early vegetative stage, sometimes several centimeters per day under warm conditions. As the plant develops, its broad leaves intercept sunlight that would otherwise reach young crop plants. At the same time, its root system competes for nitrogen and soil moisture in the upper layers where crop roots are also concentrated. Research in US soybean and cotton systems has shown that uncontrolled populations of Palmer amaranth can significantly reduce yields when competition occurs during the first few weeks after crop emergence. The plant's reproductive output adds another layer of difficulty. A single female Palmer amaranth plant is capable of producing hundreds of thousands of seeds under favorable conditions. These seeds enter the soil seed bank, creating a multi-year management problem for farmers. Over time, repeated exposure to herbicides has led to documented resistance in some pigweed populations, making chemical control less effective in certain regions. As a result, farmers often rely on integrated weed management strategies, including mechanical removal and crop rotation, to limit its spread. Inside a managed field, pigweed's rapid growth and seed production turn it from a volunteer plant into a direct competitor. And once a plant begins affecting yield inside managed farmland, it often stops being treated as a biological curiosity and starts being treated as a compliance issue. Because in several agricultural regions, pigweed isn't just treated as an inconvenience, it's regulated. Certain Amaranthus species, particularly those known to spread aggressively in crop systems, are listed on state-level noxious weed registries in parts of the United States. These classifications don't apply because the plant is toxic to eat. They apply because of how it behaves in managed farmland. When a plant is designated as noxious, landowners may be legally required to prevent its establishment or remove it if it begins spreading into cultivated fields or neighboring properties. In practice, this often means that farmers must control pigweed populations within their crop zones to remain in compliance with agricultural weed control statutes. Here's where the contradiction appears. Pigweed can grow naturally in disturbed soil, along roadsides, fence lines, drainage ditches, and vacant lots without any legal issue. Wind-dispersed seeds and soil movement can introduce it into an area without deliberate planting. But in settings where its spread threatens crop productivity, allowing it to establish intentionally may trigger enforcement under local weed management rules. Some jurisdictions issue notices requiring removal if listed species are found unmanaged on private agricultural land. So while accidental growth is treated as a management concern, deliberate tolerance in regulated farming environments can become a compliance issue, especially where neighboring crop yields are affected. But pigweed has a pattern of returning to the human diet during periods when supply chains weaken. Across different regions, wild Amaranthus species have been documented as emergency or supplemental foods during droughts, crop failures, and wartime shortages. In parts of southern Africa, leafy amaranths, often referred to locally as morogo, have long been collected from wild stands when cultivated vegetables were unavailable. Similar use of wild-growing amaranth greens has been recorded in South Asia and Latin America, where they were incorporated into stews, porridges, or flatbreads during lean seasons. Ethnobotanical surveys from the 20th century note that rural households frequently relied on spontaneous greens, including pigweed, when staple crops were lost to pests or rainfall variability. Because these plants germinate readily in disturbed soil, they often appear in fallow fields or around settlements after primary crops fail. More recently, interest in edible wild plants has expanded through foraging guides, regenerative agriculture programs, and community gardening initiatives. In some urban areas, volunteers catalog spontaneous edible species growing in unmanaged green spaces, including various Amaranthus types. What links these cases is timing. Pigweed is rarely promoted during periods of abundance. It's noticed when planned food systems begin to strain. Across different places and time periods, pigweed tends to follow the same pattern. It stays overlooked while supply is stable, then reappears in conversation when systems begin to tighten. A plant that was once treated as a fallback food during droughts, shortages, or disrupted harvests slowly returns through foraging guides, local food programs, and regenerative growing spaces. And as that rediscovery continues, the contrast becomes harder to ignore. Between a species that grows freely when left alone and the restrictions that apply once it's encouraged to stay. But what do you think? Why is it acceptable for this plant to grow by accident, but a problem when it's allowed to grow on purpose? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.